Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Let's start the oral session of T4.5, Resilience of the CTBTO Monitoring Regime, including lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the oral session. I'm Hideaki Komiyama, Chief of Monitoring Facility Support Section from CTBTO. My colleague here on the right side of the screen is Mario Villagra. He is the CTBTO Operations Center Manager, International Data Center Division from CTBTO. He will moderate questions and answers in this session. Last year, in 2020, COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges for the monitoring systems. Facing these challenges, the system demonstrated resilience while remaining functional and provided the organization and stakeholders with important lessons that will be useful in the future. This session consists of 4 oral presentations to share their challenges and measures with courage and imagination. 2 out of 4 presentations are video presentations, and the presenters are not online. If you have questions, please write your questions in the question field on the bottom of the right side of the screen. We will deliver your questions to the presenter later. Okay, let's start. First presentation. That is a video presentation. Presenter is Dr. Catherine Hafner, Program Manager of Global Seismographic Network, Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology in the United States. The title is Performance of the Global Seismographic Network, GSN, during COVID, Challenges and Opportunities.
Hello, I'm Katrine Hafner, and I'm the GSN Program Manager for Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology. And I'm giving this presentation on behalf of my colleagues, Dave Wilson at the U.S. Geological Survey, and Rob Mellers and Pete Davis at UCSD. I appreciate the opportunity to give this presentation at the session Lessons Learned from the COVID-19 Pandemic. So just a reminder of about the GSN. So it's a globally distributed set of seismic stations. It's been around for over 25 years. It represents a collaboration between the National Science Foundation and operated by IRIS and UCSD, and then also the USGS. It's used for earthquake monitoring, of course, and also for tsunami warning. It also plays a role in the IMS auxiliary seismic stations, and 50 of the GSN stations are co-located at these IMS stations, shown in red on this map. So, as with many other seismic networks, the COVID pandemic did affect our operations and maintenance protocols. And unfortunately, I don't show a map from the middle of 2020, but you can still see with this map on the left, middle of April, and then one as of the middle of June, the level of COVID it still remains high in a number of countries. It does change over time, and fortunately, in most areas, we seem to be going from very high levels to lower levels. And we can also see that the rate of vaccinations, at least in some parts of the world, is increasing. So what this meant for the GSN was basically any country that was above a level 2, so basically this orange color, we were restricted from traveling there. So that's a considerable amount of the world. And we were also somewhat restricted in the ability to go into the office. Many people did work remotely when they could. But until the COVID testing was really put in place, we were only allowed to have 25% of the employees in the capacity of the buildings allowed in to do work, and it was restricted to things like testing equipment, receiving equipment, shipping, things that could only be done remotely. So a reminder that there is considerable infrastructure at the GSN stations, much like at the IMS stations. We have a mixture of 100-meter deep boreholes and associated infrastructure, and then vault installations. It's about 1/3 to 2/3 distribution. So there's a lot of equipment and infrastructure to keep running. So this map and list here is meant to show the distribution of the issues that we faced during the pandemic, and sort of to highlight what the key issues were that we had to address. So you'll see that there's a number of times where we see a VSAT cable failure. In some cases, the communications router failed. Other things were power issues, batteries, UPS batteries, and in a few cases, there were also some equipment failures, primarily Q330 data loggers and their cables, and some secondary sensors. So how did we go about fixing these? Well, for us, local station operator support was essential to be able to fix these things. They helped with diagnosing problems. They worked very closely with the people at UCSD to figure out what the problems were, installing the spares, if that was what was needed, swapping vault sensors. I point out vault sensors because the borehole sensors are definitely more complicated to do and require more training. Replacing cables, batteries, and so forth. And here's an example of a station that's normally even hard to get to on Ascension Island. And suddenly the data stopped flowing to us, and turned out that one of the data cables had been chewed by rats, and the local operator actually ran a new data cable for us and restored our data communications. So this was a case where it would have been very difficult for us to resolve that problem. So one of the things we learned is, as much remote monitoring as you can do is essential. We have issues, especially with our completely solar-powered stations, and so they're developing a remote power monitoring system, and it basically uses a commercial off-the-shelf web device, a Tycon TP-DIN2, that's this white box here. And this allows you to monitor voltages, currents, temperatures, both inside and outside of a station computer, and issue commands remotely, various protocols. So this allows us to sort of monitor metrics over time. We have an example of a monthly plot for different parameters here, and hopefully, we can start to see if there is something indicating that a failure is about to occur, and we can start to work to fix that. So I did mention that we had been upgrading our very broadband borehole sensors before the pandemic hit. Unfortunately, that was interrupted. But we were really pleased to see that for those stations where those new sensors had been installed, the performance of the stations had really improved, especially at the longer periods. And so I show the 3 sensors that are being used. There's a Trillium 360 borehole sensor and a Streckeisen STS-6A. Some combination of these have been deployed at over 1/3 of the stations. And we're now working with the Trillium 360 vault sensor, which is installed on top of the concrete pad. And what we're doing here is comparing the instrumentation at the same stations during 2021 and 2014, and the recordings we see of seismic data after a magnitude 8.1 earthquake. And we're very happy to see that the resolution of the seismic phases we're seeing is much improved with these new sensors. So we're anxious to get more of these out there. So just to finish up with this, some key lessons that we learned and that we also knew before the pandemic was that the local station support is very critical to our success. This requires developing good relationships and collaborations over time, trusting each other, providing the necessary training to the local operators, and working closely with them to troubleshoot remotely. Another thing we noticed was that we may actually be able to reduce some of the travel that we had been doing pre-pandemic for relatively minor repairs because the local station operator could actually replace a data logger for us rather than us flying 10,000 miles to do that. In order to be able to do that, you do need to have the spare equipment on site, and particularly those pieces of equipment that would prevent the data from flowing or being collected. So things like a data logger, communication systems, cables, and power systems are crucial to have some spares. And then looking to the future, we're looking at, how do we make our stations more resilient and robust? This involves somewhat simplifying the station infrastructure as much as possible. We use very high quality seismic sensors, but the borehole sensors are very difficult or require some technical training to install them in the 100-meter boreholes. And so if we can get very similar performance using these new vault sensors, we may be better off deploying those as they're easier to exchange, to install, and don't require as much technical ability. Again, minimize the power requirements as much as possible and be able to monitor that performance as much as possible. So I appreciate your attention and thanks.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Next presentation is a live presentation. The title is Seismic Monitoring in Canada during COVID. The presenter is Dr. David McCormack from Canadian National Data Center in Canada. He is the head of CTBTO verification, Natural Resources Canada. So, David, it's your floor, please.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, from a dark and warm Ottawa. Can I just verify that my screen is being shared?
Yes, we see it.
We can see.
You can change now to patient mode.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Secretariat for the invitation to present this interesting session. I'm going to talk to you today briefly about some of our experiences during the last almost 18 months now, living under the restrictions of the COVID pandemic and trying to maintain operations of a large-scale seismic network across a continental scale within Canada. Some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that we've been unable to avoid, and the impact that it's had in terms of how we look at the operations in the future, how we think about resiliency for the network, and how we plan for the period after we emerge from this particular time that we're living through. So for background, seismic monitoring in Canada is conducted by my organization, the Hazards Information Service, which is a part of the Federal Department of Natural Resources. We currently have two primary roles. One is earthquake monitoring within Canada, and that's conducted through a fairly large network of around 180 broadband seismic stations located all across Canada. I'll show a map in a moment. You get a sense of the distribution. We typically detect and report on all earthquakes above about magnitude 3 on the Canadian landmass. And have service standards in terms of rapid reporting for larger potentially damaging earthquakes. We're also responsible for the operation of the Canadian National Data Center, and by statute in Canada through the CTBT Implementation Act, the operation of all of the seismic, infrasound and hydroacoustic stations in Canada, of which there are 11. And I'll mention just in passing, we will have a third operational role from 2024, which will be the operation of the Canadian National Earthquake Early Warning System, which is currently under construction across Canada. Historically, we've operated 3 centers for our technical support for the network, and that's important and relevant in our discussions about resilience during COVID. We have our core operations center just outside Ottawa in Eastern Canada, which is responsible primarily for Eastern and Central Canada, for the Eastern Arctic. Arctic Canada transportation and logistics tends to run north-south rather than east-west, so it's convenient to split the Arctic into 2 different regions for travel purposes. And that's also the location of the CTBT and National Data Center in Ottawa. On Vancouver Island, at the Pacific Geoscience Center, we have a maintenance depot responsible for the fairly dense network on Vancouver Island itself, but also more broadly for operations across the whole of British Columbia and the Yukon, which is both a high seismicity area, but also a fairly mountainous area that's relatively difficult to move around in. And then in the Arctic, in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, co-located with the Yellowknife Array and with responsibility for operation of that array, we also have a maintenance depot, which is responsible not just for the array itself, but also for the network stations across the Western Arctic. So to situate that on the map, you can see the locations of all three of those maintenance centers, the east, the west, and the north. And the stars, which you can see on the map, give you some sense of the scale and the number of stations within the national network. So we have a core broadband network that's relatively uniformly spaced across the country, and then significant densifications of that network in the areas where there are higher seismic hazard and higher concentrations of infrastructure and population. And if I show you a corresponding map, this is a map of the seismicity for 2020 in Canada, you get a sense that there are really three main areas of earthquakes. There's the seismicity on the west coast, primarily associated with the subduction of the Pacific and other associated plates under North America. There's a significant band of seismicity in eastern Canada running along the Ottawa River Valley and the St. Lawrence. And then there's, again, significant seismicity in the high Arctic and the archipelago, particularly around Baffin Island and into the Central
Could you
Arctic.
get closer to your microphone?
Certainly, or I'll speak a little louder.
Yes.
So to talk about our pre-COVID earthquake operations, which I think are particularly relevant because some of the ways that we did our business before, I think served us particularly well as we transitioned into COVID. So our posture has typically been to run 24/7 on-call monitoring and response. We don't typically have staff in the office monitoring our network outside regular working hours. That had the benefit that staff were already fully equipped with the necessary tools to be able to monitor and respond to issues remotely from home, which of course, as we then transitioned to full-time working from home remotely, meant that that could be spun up very, very quickly. The fact that we have regional operations meant that staff were trained to be familiar with all of the equipment within their region, which meant that we didn't have to send specialized staff in order to do specialized functions from one region of Canada to another. We've historically had a mode, I think, where our maintenance has been driven largely by the identification of problems. But for many stations, the cost of travel to the stations is very high. That's particularly true in the Arctic, where air travel is extremely expensive. And we have a relatively small number of technicians. We have about between 10 and 12 technicians to cover the whole country. So as a result, historically, we've done few preventative maintenance visits. We typically only go to a site when we do see that there's a problem with the site. And we were able to benefit, I think, because of the occurrence in Canada of fairly significant outbreaks previously of both SARS and H1N1. A fair bit of effort was put in for critical activities, and our earthquake monitoring is considered a governmental critical activity. Significant considerations about business continuity planning, which I think did serve us well during the pandemic. And the other thing which we really couldn't have planned for, but which was fortuitous in terms of timing, is that we had just finished, prior to the pandemic, a major renewal of the network over the previous 5 years. So we really were going in with essentially brand new hardware, both sensors and digitizers, early in its life cycle, and benefiting from the reliability of having equipment that is early on in its anticipated life. So in terms of the impacts of COVID and our initial responses, as soon as it became clear the scale and significance of what was happening, our critical staff were all sent home full-time immediately. That's actually still in place. We're still operating in a mode where we're essentially full-time from home. That enabled us to free up space in the office so that the field staff, who were the only staff that were then going into the office and into the laboratories, were able to go in on about a 50-50 basis, but at a sufficiently low density that they were essentially working entirely isolated and entirely alone. We literally at one point had it down to one staff member per bathroom. And it was really getting rid of everybody else that enabled us to do that. And that's enabled our field staff then to continue to be functional, and continue to do troubleshooting and repairs, continue to prepare material for the field and take it to the field as required. without trying to manage that from temporary facilities. There were significant and continue to be significant restrictions, including closures on internal borders within Canada between provinces and territories. There, we were able to take advantage of the fact that we have staff dispersed across the country. And in many cases, we were able to operate within those closed borders in a way that would have been impossible if all of our staff had been located at a single location centrally. Many of our domestic flights were cancelled because of a lack of people wanting to get on planes. That's a challenge if you have to go places regardless. And part of the response to that, at least in southern Canada, where there is a road network, is we pivoted to switch into alternate transport modes. We rented a fleet of recreational vehicles, which we were then able to send out across the country with technicians. That also had the secondary benefit of giving the technicians a safe place to stay while they were traveling without having to expose themselves to the potential risk of staying in hotels as they were moving around the country. And then finally, with lockdowns, in many cases quite severe lockdowns, even at the city level, it was important to go through the process of formal designation as federal government essential staff, to designate as essential staff so that our staff could, where appropriate, travel despite the lockdowns that were in place. So that's really a number of the direct impacts and our responses to them. This, of course, is what everyone's field travel now looks like, but it gives you some sense as to the reality of traveling in the field. That's on the left, a couple of folks in a helicopter, as socially distanced as is practical within a small, that's a Bell Ranger helicopter. And on the right-hand side, someone with a local operator working on some equipment in a remote location. Of course, social distancing, masks, and everything else is appropriate. What's it meant for our data availability? Well, just looking at the IMS stations in Canada over the last year, you can see mostly pretty good data availability. We have had 3 major outages, each associated with a separate station. And I would say probably the point is that in each of those outages, which were related in each case to communications problems, they did take longer, frankly, to rectify than we would normally expect. And that was primarily associated with challenges in getting either equipment or getting communications experts who are contractors out to those sites to support our own technicians to do the work at the site. So a couple of outages, but in general, looking at these, which are monthly averages of data availability, you can see that the uptimes have been maintained to a pretty acceptable standard. And just out of interest, I compared to compare like with like. This is a comparison of 11 months of 2021 versus the same 11 months of 1920. So we're comparing the 11 months immediately prior to the pandemic with 11 months living in the pandemic. And you can see really no clear pattern between the data availability patterns for the first year and the second year. All I've done is difference the two here. So you can see those which are above the 0 line would represent outages that were worse in 2019, and those below the line are outages below in 2020. You can see the duration of the outages are a little bit shorter in 2019, a bit longer in 2020, but otherwise no real pattern. If we look at the statistics, the total sum for the IMS across Canada for that period is really no different. 98.4% for 2020 versus 98.2% for 2019. I don't think that 0.2% difference has any statistical significance. So the only, I think, impact that we are seeing at that level of granularity, looking at a monthly statistics, are that the average downtimes when major failures do occur are somewhat longer. And that's a combination of the complexity now of logistics and a bit of a tendency, I think, from the technicians to spend more time on remote troubleshooting before they actually commit to traveling to sites, given some reluctance to commit to actually getting out of the field. So we're feeling pretty good about that, but unfortunately, not everything always goes the way we plan. This is our seismic station Iqaluit, FRB, for those of you that know the old code, it's been there a long time, AS12. It's co-located with a weather station at the airport, and our vault is just to the right of that building. And unfortunately, just after I finished these statistics and just before this presentation was ready to go to you guys, it there we go. It caught fire and burnt completely to the ground. Now, fortunately, because our site's in a vault, the seismometer itself wasn't damaged, but we did lose power and comms for a couple of weeks until we were able to arrange contractors in to sort out new communications infrastructure and a power supply that was a bit more reliable than just having a generator on site. So there continue to be challenges. There will continue to be challenges. We've learned a lot going through this period, and hopefully that will serve us well for more robust operations in the future. We've written a paper on some of this stuff. If anyone is interested, I would refer you to the paper in Seismological Research Letters, which digs into some of both our previous practices and our modifications to those and lessons learned in a bit more detail. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. We received a question. This is the how activity, maintenance, and calibration equipment in COVID-19. It is from Hendro Spekti. David?
Yes, I'm sorry. Could you possibly repeat the question?
How activity, maintenance, and calibration equipment in COVID-19.
Okay, thank you for the question. So calibration is done completely remotely from our operations centers. So that's been unaffected by COVID, frankly, because it doesn't require a visit to the site. In terms of maintenance, as we've discussed, our mode of maintenance is really just to go to the sites when we identify a problem through our remote monitoring. And we have, as we've shown in this talk, taken a number of actions in order to ensure that we're able to do that, including designation as critical personnel, traveling in as safe a mode as possible, ensuring that the staff have protective equipment, that they don't stay in commercial accommodation where possible, that they use private travel where possible, in order to reduce the risk as much as possible to the staff. And of course, more recently, more and more of our staff are now becoming vaccinated, which is making it much less risky for them to travel for maintenance purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
Move to the next presentation.
Okay, so we will move to the next presentation. Yeah, once again, thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next presentation is a video presentation. The title is Maintaining Operational Capability During COVID-19. Presenter is Ms. Noor Al-Arami. She's from General Dynamics Mission System in the United States. She is a program operations lead and advanced systems engineer. Also, she is the station operator for RN66, that is Chagos Archipelago, operated by United Kingdom. Before her presentation, once again, I would like to remind the sheet is not online. So if you have questions, please write your questions in the question field on the bottom of right side of the screen. We will deliver your questions to the presenter later. So let's start the video, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Noor Al-Alami, and I'm the Program Operations Lead for the Nuclear Monitoring Team at General Dynamics. In this presentation, I will cover how the team maintained operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll begin by going over who we are and what we do, then dive into the challenges we faced with COVID, our response to maintaining system operations and team well-being, and conclude with a couple of lessons learned. So what does the nuclear monitoring team do? We are the equipment manufacturers for the RASA system, and also the station operators for 11 U.S. radionuclide stations, as well as RN66. In total, we are responsible for 12 RASAs and 5 SANA systems. To monitor system operations, we run the Sensor Operations Center. Here, the team meets daily to discuss system status and coordinates troubleshooting efforts with engineers and local support. Our office in Chantilly, Virginia also houses the engineering testbed. This expands our capabilities to test components and develop and test software to ensure our systems run continuously. As you can imagine, COVID disrupted our daily and long-term operational plans. Some challenges we faced were, number one, travel restrictions. We canceled all trips that occurred after early March 2020. These trips included our regular PM travel, as well as coordination meetings for several planned projects. Number two, supply chain and shipping delays. During the first few months of COVID, a few vendors either closed or operated with limited staff. Fortunately, they adjusted and streamlined their processes mid-pandemic, returning to near or full capability. Number three, office restrictions. We could have lost access to the office at any time due to an internal COVID case or a change in company policy. That meant losing access to our testbed, delaying equipment testing, and routine shipments to the stations. In addition, majority of the team was working remotely, making communication a little more challenging. Which brings me to my fourth and final point, team well-being. Pre-pandemic, many of us worked in the office 100% of the time. Losing the social aspect of the job has affected productivity and general well-being of the team. So what did we do to address these challenges? We implemented various strategies to ensure the stations, local personnel, and staff have the necessary resources to continue supporting the mission. This included revisiting our sustainment and forward deployment plans, reviewing and refining our QA process, updating the training material repository, developing a remote preventative maintenance plan, and to address team well-being, provide numerous opportunities to improve the team's technical skill set and morale. Let's begin with our sustainment and forward deployment plans. In anticipation of travel and shipping restrictions, we completed the following simultaneously. We implemented a remote spares depot at RN75, which is located in Charlottesville, Virginia, and is about 2 hours away from our office. The remote depot ensured we had continuous access to equipment and increased our capability to keep stations running. In addition, we periodically reviewed station performance and determined if additional spares were required on site to reduce and limit downtime. Finally, since we were not traveling, we were able to shift focus to equipment testing. This helped increase the number of deployable spares ready to go at any given time. The graphic on the right lists a few examples of how we were able to limit and minimize system downtime due to either having available spares on site or equipment ready to ship immediately from our depot. We continue improving our QA process by reviewing the software and hardware components within our testbed. We've been updating our testing procedures, reviewing and cleaning the code, and upgrading various test rig components. Alongside these improvements, we're working to increase testing efficiency by creating a blueprint to automate many procedures. The infographic shows an overview of our accomplishments in 2020. We've tested close to 500 items, introduced 2 new automated test rigs, and expanded our lab space by 40%, allowing us to test 3 full RASA systems at the same time. The extra space in the lab allowed us to create a dedicated ESD area for our sensitive equipment, as well as house new tools to assist with prototyping test rigs, such as the filters test rig, which improved testing capability by 50%. To keep our team and local operators engaged and their technical knowledge up to speed, we updated our training repository to support the new normal. We launched a new remote training curricula over Zoom. We hosted several sessions over various time zones to accommodate all of our local operators. During these sessions, engineers provided a general system overview, performed live demos of procedures, and most importantly, gave us a chance to check in and say hello to our local operators. In addition, we initiated a video production program where we created instructional videos with closed captioning and voiceover narrations. These how-to videos helped with troubleshooting efforts, whether for the lab or on site for both engineers and the local operators. Lastly, we organize periodic workshops for the team. Any team member can volunteer to present, and all presentations are recorded and stored in our repository for future reference. To mitigate some of the travel restrictions, we created a modified, non-invasive maintenance plan to complete remotely with local support. Engineers provided on-call support for local operators while they were on site completing PM tasks. We also had the opportunity to remotely upgrade the RASA software, as well as ensure the station PC software and security tools were up to date. In addition, we worked with the local operators to proactively replace smaller components to help keep in line with our sustainment plan. With the strategies we've implemented, all the U.S. stations remained fully mission capable, reporting over 95% data availability 1 year after the pandemic. These accomplishments could not have been done without the support of the team. As I mentioned earlier, majority of the team worked full-time in the office pre-pandemic, and shifting to mostly remote was an adjustment. To bridge this gap, we implemented new processes and provided the team with various options to stay connected and maintain productivity. The graphic on the right lists a few examples. Starting from the upper left, we continuously review and update the operations, research and development, software, and program roadmaps. These roadmaps are uploaded to the repository for all team members to view. We offered and will continue to offer flex scheduling for team members, especially to those who are caretakers and/or parents. We periodically hold one-on-one check-ins with all team members to address issues immediately. We also reorganized the team structure to create smaller, more focused groups. A couple of examples are the Noble Gas team, the UX team, and the DevOps team. The DevOps team continuously patches and upgrades our program software tools like SolidWorks, QuickBooks, Jira, and Confluence. Lastly, the engineering managers created a new hire onboarding portal to assist new hires and engineers that joined us during the pandemic. GD had its fair challenges adapting to the new normal. We learned a lot through the experience and hope anyone viewing this presentation can also learn from our lessons learned. In this table, I've highlighted a few examples I'd like to share with you all. Program operations. It was a challenge to maintain 95% data availability. Previous preparation over the years certainly made it more attainable for us. However, we're beginning to see a decline in system performance due to the travel restrictions. The remote PMs helped mitigate downtime, but they cannot fully replace travel. Testbed. Over the past year, engineers spent time increasing their knowledge on systems, upgrading the lab equipment, and testing new tools like the 3D printer. However, not only did lab organization take a hit, there was frustration over not knowing who was using which lab system. Our testing team is soon debuting a new lab tracking system, specifically to reserve test systems for a set period of time. Engineers can update these tickets with the latest status information. Training. Team members were encouraged to take advantage of the numerous free trainings that were made available during the pandemic. However, since everyone was learning on their own, collaboration was non-existent. The workshops helped address this issue by allowing the team to share what they've learned with each other. In addition, our local operator virtual training was also a success and will likely remain in the future. Personnel. Team members are excited to have the flexibility of working at home and/or in the office. To get to this state required examining what was and wasn't working for us. We are still tweaking and fine-tuning things, but are looking forward to supporting the mission in the new normal. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is...
Thank you very much, Noor. Since her presentation is video, we will deliver your questions to the presenter. No, so
She's online.
no.
Okay.
So if you have questions, please write the bottom of the right side of the screen, please. Okay, this is the final presentation and live presentation. The title is Operation of the IMS Network During the COVID-19 Pandemic, Challenges and Solutions. The presenter is Dr. Thomas Hoffman from CTBTO. He is the Chief of Operations Section, International Data Center. Tom, it's your floor, please.
Yeah, I'm not at the beginning. Here we go. Good morning, good day, good afternoon. Thomas Hoffman. I will talk about the operation of the IMS network during the COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically focus in this presentation on the challenges and solution. Yesterday we had 2 events already on this topic of COVID and resilience, with very interesting talks from many station operators showing what impact the pandemic had on operating their stations locally. We had very good discussion also on that, so please have a look at the summaries. And here we are now at the IMS side of the network, and I will go through some of the challenges that we have faced on our side. First of all, I would like to appreciate the support of all the people that are on this list of the ops section. In addition to, of course, appreciating at the beginning the dedication of the station operators worldwide. Without, we would not have been able to go through this pandemic and the problems we had. They really showed great dedication, and they really helped keeping the network alive. So we face these unprecedented challenges as everybody on Earth, and of course, operating a worldwide network is impacted by that. And specifically in March 2020, when the Austrian government decided that we should all go in lockdown, this severely affected the operations, and there was a need to act. Of course, we already prepared for this a bit earlier, and the impact really came from, and we have heard this also in the presentations before in this session, national and international travel restrictions, logistical issues, that were mainly affected, and that had an impact on, in the end, data availability. There's two examples which I already explained in detail yesterday in event number 2. So I will only mention them, but they are important examples. It's one of them is the SHI station calibration program that we have, and the other one is the QA/QC program for the radionuclide network, which both of them they suffered from the impact of the pandemic. So a quick slide that I like to put at the beginning: responsibilities according to the operational manual. We have, of course, some responsibilities on the PTS side. You can see some highlighted word here: supervision and coordination of the network, providing assistance to proper functioning of the station, ensuring operation of the stations by concluding agreements, and the global communications infrastructure. On the other hand, we have the station operators being responsible for operating, maintaining the individual facilities according to the operation manual, ensuring that stations are operating properly and meeting the data availability, data quality, and data surety requirements. And finally, proper reporting to the PTS, preventive maintenance, and timely troubleshooting, and if something goes wrong, unscheduled maintenance, of course, and that means very often accessing the site of the station. And here's this interface between the two, and this goes through reporting, communication, and this was an important part in the COVID pandemic, that there was changes in the way we did this. That will come up in a few slides. So strategies for impact mitigation. First of all, we needed to move to remote operation, which was done fairly effectively and was already prepared beforehand. So we were actually able to move into remote offices and operate quite efficiently with good equipment from home, most of the staff. Then also engagement with the station operator was changed and intensified, and different means of communication were used. We had intensified meeting schedule and some meetings that were specifically focused on the segment of COVID-related issues. Then we reported frequently to the outside world by different means, ECS statements, but also tweets that you can see here by the executive secretary reporting on the state of health. We had special management of cases where where the lockdown really affected the station, and where we could hope for higher management intervention through the permanent mission to help easing things in terms of travel, shipment, and logistics. The operations center played an important role here and a critical role in this whole business. So first of all, the center provided a location for teleconferences, conferences, meetings, and special shifts and operational meetings. Also, the state of health monitoring originated here, and all the tweets that went out to the community. It also serves, now I'm locked up here. It also serves as a tool for preventive maintenance, and it also supported during lockdown, of course, the OSI, and further developed the support center for OSI. So if we look at these blue boxes here on top, this is kind of the normal approach. So we have this communication between the PTS and the station operator, usually done through the IRS ticketing system. on the left, and also the continuous monitoring of the performance by PTS officers, by ops, and by others. And we then took a more flexible approach in doing all these things, because we noticed that the station operator really needed our support in many different ways. And the first of all was how to establish the communication. So different ways of communication were used. And as I mentioned before, also some of the problems where we faced issues with importation, issues with travel restriction to the site locations of stations. We had intervention of higher level and the permanent mission to help ease these things and to actually get station operators to the site, or equipment being delivered to stations. And in some cases, and some of them were reported yesterday also in event 1 and 2, this really helped in then resolving the issue. Even though a time delay was in general there, it took definitely longer than normal. Here's example number 1, which I've showed yesterday already, so I will only very quickly mention. It's the IMS radionuclide network quality program, QA/QC, where we need to ship samples. And you can see, if you compare the table between 2018, 19, and 20, there are red numbers, and they clearly show that the delivery and transport has impacted the delivery of those samples to the labs. On the other hand, and that's kind of the compensation we had in many instances. So on one hand, something went wrong. On the other hand, there was this extra effort done, and this was also done here by the labs to improve. And the meantime of analysis was actually better during the shutdown. So timely communication and collaborative efforts were definitely a key here to make this a success in this QA/QC program. Similarly, in the calibration activities, there's a scheduled calibration plan for every year. That was also there for 2020. And when we faced the lockdown, there was definitely a lower number of calibration as scheduled for the first half of 2020. But then with the collaboration of the station operators making a different plan, we were actually able to pick it up and to improve, and we actually increased the number of scheduled calibration in comparison with previous years. So in a way, the COVID scenario became an opportunity to better focus on action and to maximize, and that has also flown into the program of this year. So the new program is up and running for calibration. Now let's have a look at the data availability. This is a bit of a complicated chart that I need to explain. So we see always a cluster of bars here, and the first bar is the first half of 2020 as a reference, and then we see the weekly bars later. And here the first cluster is primary seismic station, the second hydroacoustic station, infrasound station, auxiliary seismic. Then we move on down here, radionuclide, particulate, and noble gas stations. And we can see in general, there is impact, and we had some times where we really dropped here because some station or more, or 2 stations even went offline, and it took a while to repair. But if we look at the overall trends, they are fairly stable, and this could only be achieved by closer communication with the station operators, additional support, logistical support, and also by the extraordinary help of the station operator. They really took the extra mile to help wherever they could, and we very much appreciate this. Here you can see an interesting slide where you can see the remote access to the PTS from the offices, from the home offices during different weeks before Christmas. Every day of the week, you see a peak of those people accessing the network, the computers at the PTS, and then you can go, if we go into the holidays here, you see a reduced access. The time was also used for improving the PTS monitoring communication tools. In the meantime, there was different things like cross-monitoring introduced, and different tools that you might recognize on that slide have additions or improvements. This brings me to my last slide. The unprecedented COVID pandemic provided the PTS, and in particular the IDC operations, with an opportunity to test the readiness to respond to network-wide and nearly simultaneous limitation in operating the facilities. The very close cooperation and interaction with the operators in a more flexible approach helped that we got through this very smoothly and with not so much impact on data availability. The stakeholders took the extra mile, as I said, to really assure the best possible level of performance under these special conditions. And finally, the experience and solution developed during the COVID-19 pandemic constitute a benchmark to continue operating this IMS station in an effective way and in agreement with the operational requirements. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tom.
He needs to stop sharing, I think. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tom, once again. Yeah, at this moment, no question from audience. But let me see. I would like to ask.
Well, there is a question. This one. Yes, if they have any learning.
Okay. So within your virtual training, do you have any e-learning platform?
Could you repeat your question? There was acoustically an e-learning. Was that?
Yes.
Within the virtual training, do you have any e-learning platform?
There's actually a number of e-learning modules being developed specifically for purpose for the station operators to do certain things that are required, and we had quite a few live training session in earlier times, and we have moved to quite a bit of online training during the COVID pandemic, and it has shown to be quite effective, I have to say.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. Let me see. Now, yeah, all presentations were done. Still we are collecting the questions. If you have, so please write your questions in the field of the question. And at the same time, you see, today afternoon from 1:15 p.m. Vienna time, there will be a panel discussion on the same theme, the resilience of the CTBT monitoring regime, including lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic crisis panel discussion. So please join this panel discussion later, if you can.
Yes, exactly, Hideaki. Exactly in about 1 hour from now, Central European time, 1:15, panel session on the same topic will follow. And then any questions that apply to this subject, we invite all attendees to continue submitting, and during the panel discussion, you will have the opportunity to talk further about this important topic that made us all, our life complicated, but we are surviving very well. I think the presentations were very good. I think that there is I would say, an analogy, the conclusions about all the activities and all the measures everybody took to alleviate with the situation. And thanks to all station operators, all providers, all the staff from all institutions and the PTS, because this has made possible that the IMS remains operational and has shown definitely resilience, right?
That's
You have something else to add? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. And thank you for all presenters. This time we are facing the challenges still going on. But from last year, we are dealing with these challenges and trying to solve, or trying to find the way forward. And today's presentations shows the innovative activities and response to the challenges with ideas, courage, and imagination. And definitely, we are learning many things from current situation. And then all presenters shared without hesitation their challenges and their response, their solutions. Let's keep those ideas and grow and discussing together with the presenter and audience. Then let's make this situation better. Okay. So
Since we have still a couple of minutes more to go, there is a follow-up question on the e-learning platform for Tom Hoffman. And I think that it will be good if you pass it on.
Okay. Yeah, we received Tom, still here.
Yes, I'm here.
We received a question. It's about the training again. Is training available on the CTBTO website?
Related to the e-learning.
Yes.
As far as I know, there's a special server where those e-learning modules are stored. That's accessible for station operators.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is it's narrowed to the community of the
Not open to.
not open to public, right?
Yes.
It's open only to
It's
the
station.
community
Yeah.
of station
I
operators.
cannot tell you exactly what the access login requirements are. I would have to ask, but I'm sure that all nominated station operators have the right to access these modules.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. So I think with that we can complete.
Okay, so that's a time to close this session. Thank you very much for presenters, and thank you very much everyone for joining us. And as I mentioned before, please join the panel discussion. Yeah. Approximately 1 hour later, from 1 15 p.m. Vienna time. Please join this panel discussion on resilience of the CTBT time regime, including lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks to everyone for your
Thank you.
attendance, and thanks to all the staff also contributing to this virtual mode of reaching out. We wish you a nice day and follow up with us very soon, actually in 1 hour, on the continuation of this session on an open panel session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.